All right, let's tackle data logging. I've had some people ask about this, so I just wanted to go over. There's two kinds of data logging. There's internal data logging and external data logging. Internally, the ECU can record data logs on its own, and then you can download them later. And this is all set up in this menu up in here. And so that was the SD card data logging. The ECU has an SD card inside. I ship it with an 8 gigabyte card, and this is how by default how I set it up. And in general, I have it set to record all the time as long as the engine's running. And you can see there's a trigger here. You could do it by a button, or you could press always, and it would always record anytime the ECU is even powered up, every time the key is on. But I have it set to a trigger, RPM, and anytime it goes over 450 RPM, which is anytime the engine starts up. And I have the sample rate at 50 milliseconds, which gives us 20 frames per second, which seems like a good data rate to give you most of what you need. You could set this shorter to get even more frames per second if there's some really fine resolution type of data you want to get, but 20 frames per second usually covers most of the normal stuff you want to data log. And I have it set to about 10 minutes, so it will record for 10 minutes and then immediately start a new log, then go for 10 minutes, then start. So basically it breaks it down into little chunks, so that I think it's easier to handle that way. But you could do 15 or 20 minutes, however long you want to do. Just remember you have to download this off of the ECU, and that takes a little bit of time. So sometimes it's easier to download a 10-minute file compared to, say, an hour-long file. Here's where I have it set what to do after the log is done, and it just says start a new log. And so down here is the list of things it's going to data log internally. This has nothing to do with the external data logging that's done with your laptop. This is just the internal data logging. And here's some of the things that I don't have on the list, but it's less likely that you would need. But you can add these up to a certain amount. I want to say it's 120 bytes, something like that, with the 128 byte block size. So that's how that's set up. So anytime the engine starts, it will start data logging, and then when you turn the key off, it will stop data logging. When you want to download a log, you go to this menu here. Let me go back. Browse, import SD card. That menu will only show up if you have the ECU powered up. And here's a list of the logs it's taken and the date that it was taken. It automatically names them for you. And if you want to download it, you can click on it and right click on it and click download selected files. And it will download onto your laptop. It will download into the same format as a normal log file, and which is an MSL file. And you can look at it just like an external log you would off the laptop. There, if you want to erase the card, you can format it. Now another thing is, if you happen to have the let me show you here. If you happen to have the engine running, I have this connected to a simulator, so I'm going to pretend the engine's running. So now that I started it up, you can see there's RPM here. It should be data logging. Now if I go back to this, you're going to see this little circle here because it's actively logging. You can't download while it's logging. And but it says right here, click reset and wait to stop logging. So you can click that and it will stop, and then you can download what was just recorded. All right, let me turn the engine back off here. Okay, so that's the internal logging. And like I said, that anytime the engine's running, the way I have it set by default, it's always data logging everything. Or at least everything that's on this list right here, which is most of the stuff you will need. You might need to add, if you, let's see, have an ethanol sensor or some extra sensors, oil pressure, it will end up, when you set those up, it'll show up on this list and you can add those on. Okay, so that is internal data logging. That's inside the ECU. External data logging is done with your laptop. And if you want to make a log, let me get the engine, quote, engine going here. Let's see. You would go to the graphing and logging tab, and you would just hit start data logging. Now, right now it's logging. You're not seeing anything. That's because there's nothing selected on this side. So let me select air fuel ratio, so you can see it's logging. Now, just because I select what I select here, that doesn't mean it's only logging air fuel ratio. It's logging everything that the ECU has in its memory, in its mind, which is down here. It's logging everything. This is just how you choose what you want to see at that particular time when you go back to review the log. And then we're going to stop data logging. You just hit stop right here. Now you can trigger that type of logging also, and that's on this screen. This is another way to start data. You can press start data logging here. That will do the same thing as this button right here. But triggered logging is if you want the laptop to only start logging when a certain condition happens. For example, this one's set up with throttle position, and if it goes over 80%, then start logging. And then you can also set up when you want it to stop logging. All right. I usually don't use triggered logging. I just press the button and go, but you can do it however you want to do it. Okay, so let me turn the engine back off here. So now the way this screen is set up, this is very configurable, okay? The things down here, a lot of times this is very small to read, so sometimes I'll just shove that out of the way. If you go to this button here, this little gear, there's a lot of things you can change to vary how this is set up, how it looks, what you want to look at, and I'm going to show you some of the things that I do that I prefer. And so I'm going to open a data log. Let's see here. And you can see it's only showing AFR, but if I do battery voltage, it's laying it right on top of the other one, so you can't see it. But if we go to this menu here, you can see there's some different kinds of views. Right now it's set for the 2 table view, and if we slide this down here, you can see there's 2 tables here, and as you go through the log, it'll move this little bubble around, so you can see what was happening in these tables at any particular moment in time. And you can change what the table is by clicking these buttons up here. For example, fuel settings, there's the target AFR table, or the VE table. There's the AFR table. So if you go to the 1 table view, it kind of does this and kind of squashes it. Sometimes you got to go back and forth to some different views to get what you want. But a lot of times I'll use the no table view when I'm just reviewing a log, and that gives you more area to look at here. Okay, I opened up this data log, and what I wanted to show you was this checkbox here. It says keep graph centered, and you can see when I'm trying to go through this log, basically the only way to go back and forth in this case is to move this little slider bar at the bottom, and the line will stay in the center and show you what the value was right where that line is at. I prefer to be able to move this line around, and if I turn off the keep graph centered, now you can see where I can take my mouse and slide this back and forth to look at things. I'm going to add some other things on there. There's boost. And so now wherever I slide it to, I get a reading down here. Here's where it's telling you what the values are: air fuel ratio, battery voltage, boost PSI, and here's what the reading is. You can match up the colors. I prefer to have this text up here right next to those. So if you go back to our options here, under trace value positions, you can check show the cursor values by the field name. So you see it moved it up there. So now I don't have to look back and forth between the two. But some of the other things I like, I'll just go through a lot of these options here. So if we go to the no table view, sometimes, like I said, I like that because it gives you more room to look at it. And mouse wheel action, this changes if your mouse has a little wheel on it. Right now it's set up so that if you move that wheel up and down, it will zoom back and forth. I'm doing it right now. I'm moving my mouse down, then I move it back up, and you can see it's zooming in and out of the log. Or if you select page data back, it'll just go forward and backward in the log. Show the 50% graph line. That adds this dotted line here. I think that's just a personal preference. I usually don't need to use it, so I leave it off. Okay, now the min and max values. It can be helpful to set these up. This normally is done automatically, and so when you load a log, it will set up the scaling on the graph. And let me show you maybe if I can. I'm going to put up throttle position as an example. I'm going to see what the highest TPS value was. I guess it tells me right there. The max in the entire log, the max value was 8.7%. And so what that does is it automatically scales. That was probably this little spike here. What it does is it puts that at the top. And sometimes it can be misleading. So if you were to look at this log and you see this purple throttle position trace, you might think that the throttle position went to 100%. Well, it didn't. It's just showing you what the maximum it was in that particular log. So you can go to the min and max values. Here's what's on the graph right now, TPS. You press this little checkbox here, and it asks you what you want it to, the smallest value you want to be, and what the largest value you want to be as far as scaling on here. And I'll show you what I mean. So minimum would be 0%. Maximum, let's say I want it to be 100%. When I hit OK, you'll see that this rescaled down to a more believable amount. So this is at 4.5%. This is the 8.7%. So now if you came to a spot that was 100%, it would go up to the top. And you can do that. Another good place to do that is the air fuel ratio and the target air fuel ratio. Set min and max for AFR. So we're just going to say the lowest reading we ever want to see is, let's say, 4:1, which you should never have with gasoline. And the maximum, let's say, 18. Okay, so we got 4 and 18. And this is for the AFR, which is the actual AFR. We want to set the target AFR to the same values so that they will be close to each other, 4 and 18. Okay, so you can see it dropped right on top of the other one. So the darker one is what the target air fuel ratio, which is 13, and then the lighter colored one is what the actual air fuel ratio is, and that can help with tuning so that you can see, so they're scaled exactly the same way. And you can do that with a lot of different ones, whatever you have on there. If you want to scale it differently, this is the little menu that you go to do that. So we went over the keeping the graph centered. That's what allows me, unchecking that allows me to move back and forth like this. And the trace value positions, that was up here. Alphabetize the field list. That just exactly what it says. It puts everything in alphabetical order so it's easier to find. Scale to log length. Basically that's going to take this entire log and squash it down I'll show you here, so that the entire log fits on one screen. So that's the beginning and that's the end. So I turn that back off. Now if you have a log that looks like that, you can zoom in and out down here. See the little magnifying glass? You can zoom in so it's easier to look at. Select displayed fields. This is everything that will be on these lists that you can select from, which is everything. See, there's nothing left over here. So you can select from anything that you want to look at. Okay, now this last one is the way I prefer to set this up. It's called the quick trace selection. Right now, the way this is set up is you have to select what you want to look at over here on these lists, and I'm going to turn this on, and it's going to have to reload Tuner Studio, but it changes the way this is selected, and it's easier for me. So I'm going to click that, and I have to close it and restart it. Okay, so I'm going to open a data log. Let's try that one right there. Okay, so you can see over on the left side, those lists went away, but it changed how this data is displayed over here. Now I can select by clicking on these little boxes, and I can see them all at once. And I'd like to have that at the bottom. Let's see if I can. No table view, one table view, two table view. There it is. I usually go to the two table view, and then you slide this up from the bottom so you can see all those, and then I'll slide this out of the way. So now I have a graph that goes from one side to the other, and you can see all the different things you want to select down here. And they're in alphabetical order, so you can see across your AFR, all the different AFR, the battery, you can turn that on. Now the way this is set up right now is you can only look at 4 traces per chart, and if you go over 4, it will start a new chart under it. That will be changed in an upcoming version. There's actually a beta version out where you can just overlay them all on top of each other if you want to, and it doesn't split it up into separate screens. So that'll be changed soon. Here's the map reading, and so again, you can just slide back and forth, see what your readings are. You can play it in real time, and it'll just slowly step through, and you can see what happened. Also, the upcoming version will let you play a log and look at the dash cluster while you're playing it, and it'll show that in real time also. But I think that covers it for data logging. And once again, the internal data logging, it doesn't record quite as much as your laptop can, but it still records a lot. There's a lot of parameters in there. But if you want to get absolutely everything, you can connect with your laptop and record it that way. But most of the time, the internal is fine. Then you just download it off of the ECU when you're done. But I think that will cover it for data logging. And as far as saving, when you make a data log off the laptop, if you hit start and hit stop, once you hit stop, it's automatically saved, and it will be saved into the Tuner Studio projects, into your project folder, and there's a folder inside there called data logs. So it'll always go in there, and so you can select them out of there, and they're automatically named. Some of these that have extra, I renamed those for some reason, or somebody else renamed them and sent me a log. But usually it names it with the date and the time, and that makes it easy to remember. And I think that's about it for data logging. So hopefully that helped out with some little tips on that. And I'll talk to you guys later. The next one I'm going to be doing will be on boost control. So see you later.